Here's a brief rundown of how the major media covered up the great polio fiasco during the 1950s. I'm going to give you some quotes from various magazines that covered that story in its entirety. With my first two audio CDs, you will easily determine the truth and see through the lies and the cover-ups. So let's begin on Time magazine, April 11th, 1955. It says the newspapers last week broke out in banner lines, such as the New York Telegram, and I quote, "Salk shots prevented polio in every U.S. child tested." This assertion was patently wrong, for in at least 4 states where there was no doubt the children got the real vaccine, health officers admitted that some of the vaccinated had developed polio, including some paralytic cases. End of quote. And this was a day before the announcement that Salk vaccine was safe, effective, and potent. Now I have in front of me a newspaper dated April 12th, 1955. This is from Massachusetts. It's the Pittsburgh Sentinel. I quote Dr. Francis's official report that declared the vaccine had produced an extremely successful effect. Out of 1,800,000 children in the test program, 1,013 cases of polio developed. In areas where the vaccine and dummy shots were used interchangeably, 428 kids came down with polio. In observed control areas, where only second graders were inoculated, 585 children developed polio. It is hard for me to understand when you read this how anyone could claim that the vaccine was safe or prevented polio when 1,013 kids got polio after they took the vaccine or the dummy shot. But yet this paper said it was incredibly safe. Let's go on. Time magazine, May 9th, 1955. Larry Vickers, 6 years old, of San Diego, California, came down with polio 5 days after vaccination. A 13-month-old boy from Idaho came down with polio. Susan Pierce came down with polio 3 days after vaccination. 2 days later, she was dead. Moscow, Idaho, another 7-year-old girl died. A rash of cases were reported from Napa, California to Chicago. The excuse given is the same excuse they used when Jenner injected his pus into people and they got sick or died. The quote is, "Why, there were 2 possibilities. They might have had the virus already inside of them, or it was a bad batch of vaccine." May 16, 1955, Time magazine. 52 cases of polio among the vaccinated children. Are you ready for this? The Surgeon General, Leonard Shealy of the United States Public Health Service, says there's no cause for alarm. President Eisenhower gave the vaccine top billing at his press conference. The paper said everyone, including the ones who got sick or died, might have latent polio germs in their system. Time magazine, May 23, 1955. Surgeon General Shealy reported 67 cases of vaccinated kids getting polio. 55 from the Cutter Company, 10 from Eli Lilly, and 2 from Wyeth. So they banned the Cutter vaccine, but not the others. That's not important. We don't need to know that, right? Surgeon General Shealy reaffirmed his faith in the vaccine. Time magazine, May 30th, 1955. Most doctors advised parents to get their kids the shots. And then it turns around and says, doctors resented the lack of scientific information on Salk's vaccine in the medical publications. Amazing. Now it says polio cases up to 78, with 5 children dead. It says the Cutter case is 59, Eli Lilly is up to 14, and Wyeth is 5. The Surgeon General, while in the meeting with closed doors with a virologist trying to figure out what to do, still advises giving shots. The article says the blame was also put on the National Foundation. Years of publicity had built up the danger of polio, all out of proportion to its actual incidence. Time magazine, June 6, 55. Dr. William Seabrill, Jr., Director of the Public Health Service's National Institute of Health, testifying before a House committee, in effect answered the question that for a month had haunted parents. Was the Salk vaccine safe? His answer? No. The article talked about changing the testing procedures and getting back to business. With a change in testing, Surgeon General Shealy called it making a safe vaccine safer, and polio cases were now up to 113 amongst the vaccinated. Time magazine, June 13, 55. The article blames the fiasco on the Cutter Company. The experts blame live virus slipping through the killing process. Dr. Louis Gebhardt, a virologist, flatly stated he found live virus in the Cutter vaccine. What nobody knew is not only was Gebhardt lying, as you now know about the live virus, but he was Salk's buddy. He worked in the virus typing program with Salk for 3 years. Nothing like protecting your own, right? President Eisenhower picked, of all people, Nelson Rockefeller to investigate the vaccine situation. Yes, I know what you're thinking. And you're right. You'll like this one. On the question when shots should be given, they said vaccine given in August may give life-saving protection against polio in September, but any injection at that time may provoke a paralytic reaction from virus already smoldering in the system, which might otherwise have done no harm. How the hell do you see a smoldering virus? Time magazine, June 20, 55. It was a change in the testing of the vaccine and the vaccine being changed itself. They said that viruses came alive. Salk said, well, they didn't make my vaccine right. Time magazine, 4, July 1955. After a closed meeting of 26 polio and public health experts, last week they publicly agreed with the National Foundation that inoculations of Salk vaccine should continue. Really. The probable benefits, the committee reasoned, outweighed the possible risk. Yeah, we've heard that a few times, haven't we? Albert Sabin, a Salk critic wanting to sell his own vaccine, said Salk vaccine should be stopped until the vaccine can be made consistently safe. When the meeting was over, 8 virologists voted to continue the program. 3 voted not to continue, and Surgeon General Shealy hurried with a statement endorsing the continued vaccination. Now, in these articles, there were no more polio cases listed. And the reason is that the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare told the Surgeon General that President Eisenhower does not want to hear of any more cases of vaccine-induced polio. We all know what happened to the reports after that statement. And the results of that meeting have never been disclosed to this day. Harper's Magazine, August of 55. Says Thomas Francis found the Salk vaccine to be effective in preventing paralytic polio and remarkably safe. That's another lie, isn't it? Says over sensationalism by the press, radio, and TV, and a misguided attempt by the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare to withhold from the public information the public was entitled to have from the beginning. Says the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis had paid for development of the Salk vaccine and paid and arranged for the field experiment. They ordered vaccine to vaccinate 9 million children. Are you ready for this? Before the Francis report was even released. Like they didn't know anything, right? The New York World Telegram reported the vaccine had been found 100% effective. We wonder who released that press to those people and told that lie. Francis said the press conference that the vaccine had been 60 to 90% effective in preventing paralytic polio. He said there's no evidence to connect the vaccine with the cases of polio that did occur among the vaccinated children. Why, those children simply did not develop immunity or did not develop it in time. That's real scientific proof, isn't it? Just words. The same day, the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare signed licenses for the manufacture of the Salk vaccine. That meant the government was now on the hook. On May 7, the Surgeon General stopped the vaccine program. The government virologist and the non-government virologist, including Basil O'Connor from the National Foundation, who paid for everything, were called into a meeting. May 25th, the Surgeon General appointed another committee. A couple of representatives of the Public Health Service and 5 polio experts, including Dr. Salk. They recommended changes in the testing procedure. That's amazing. They wanted to change the testing procedure rather than calling the whole program completely off. And the article says, over the past 20 years, polio has been built up into something more of a threat to health than it really was. This buildup was due to the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis annual drive to raise money. The article says the Salk vaccine is one of the most thoroughly tested biological products in history. And by the way, the worst number of cases, the year was 1952, with a little over 21,000 cases of paralytic polio. There were 160 million people roughly in the country at that time. Do the math and you will know just how rare polio really was. The article says the Department of Health, Education, Welfare, and the Public Health Service has not been candid with the public. Nice way of saying they were liars, right? The writer says, who's a medical doctor by the way, he visited the National Institutes of Health and was not permitted to see any public health service, scientific, or technical people. He says all the important questions went unanswered for weeks, though those secrets of the state were not involved, just the health of the American people. And then they made the excuse that the polio virus might get into the air to cause this contamination or other. This tells you a lot in between the lines. The article says during the 10 days between the first case of polio and May 6th, Secretary Elvita Culp Hobby had made it plain to Dr. Shealy, the Surgeon General, that there must be no more post-inoculation polio cases on the Eisenhower administration's political doorstep. The immunization program was to be stopped unless and until the Surgeon General could give or obtain from the experts an ironclad guarantee of no more polio incidents. Dr. Shealy knew he couldn't do that, and the virologist would not guarantee the vaccine. So the person who got the program restarted was Dr. Salk. Shealy had called in experts in an ad hoc meeting, which meant anybody could say what they wanted, and there was a ton of opposition to Jonas Salk. But on May 20th, Salk sent Shealy a telegram informing him that he would not attend any more ad hoc meetings. He told Shealy to appoint a committee who could make decisions and act. This letter was then followed up by Basil O'Connor, president of the National Foundation. The deck was now being stacked for gaining this program and getting it back into operation. This committee was appointed on May 25. The committee, of course, consisted of Salk. They drew up a new set of safety standards. It was a 3-step program. 1, make sure there was no live virus. 2, make the killing process longer. And 3, test for live virus. Shealy said the new testing would make the vaccine safer and kill the virus. Man, such bullshit. It's obvious now that everyone was concerned about saving their ass. No one was concerned about the victims or their families. Time magazine, November 28, 1955. The scientific courts judging the Salk polio vaccine have had an exasperating way of reversing themselves. Now it's safe, now it's not. Now it works, now it doesn't. Dr. Shealy says there were striking differences in the degree of clarity of the different fluids from which the various manufacturers have prepared vaccine. After the viruses grown in a broth of monkey kidney tissue and left standing, a sediment may appear at the bottom of the flask. The sediment is like lumps in porridge. When formaldehyde is added to kill the virus, it cannot reach the particles in the middle of the lumps, thus leaving them dangerously infected. Boy, these guys never stop with the BS. Says that the polio meetings vaccine is good but imperfect. The backers of the vaccine seem to be determined to keep the public from learning much about those imperfections. And the public had paid $3.5 million for this test. They were entitled to know the truth, weren't they? This is how they covered up the Great Salk Vaccine Massacre of 1955, where it was admitted over 200 kids were paralyzed and 10 more died from the Salk vaccine. We don't know, of course, how many were never reported because of President Eisenhower's orders to his Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. But it is obvious now that these people lied and they covered up the real story of what happened. This vaccine should have been stopped in its tracks. Think about it. The government licensed the vaccine. They were not going to admit they made a mistake. They'd be open to a lot of lawsuits. Basil O'Connor of the National Foundation had raised millions of dollars in his polio campaigns, was certainly not going to admit that he was wrong or made a mistake. His reputation was at stake. And Thomas Rivers, who promoted the lie that a virus was living and a cause of human disease from old Martinez-Bejernek, in order to make money on vaccines, was certainly not going to admit anything. So everyone covered it up. No one had the guts to tell the truth. And because of that, we have so many children today taking so many vaccines and having so many problems because this lie has never been exposed until now. Each future audio that I do will tell a story about the excuses, the alibis, the lies, and the truth of the vaccine and vaccine industry and their cover-up. I want to thank you for listening once again. Please share this with everyone you can. And again, you can contact me at jimokelly@yahoo.com.
And there you go.